Well, on behalf of New College Berkeley, we want to welcome you to our event tonight. So grateful that you can be here, and I know that some of you are online, so we are so glad that you are able to tune in for this evening. You might know that our new tagline for New College Berkeley is Awaken Theological Imagination. Now, what does that mean, right? I think for a long time, right, we have relied a lot on our heads, and that's good. But we really want to begin to understand the importance of imagination. C.S. Lewis, of course, was really big on this, like the exercise of the imagination, a way to really understand in a deeper level, like who God is, and there's a way that we can access truth through our imaginations, and art is one of the key ways that we get to practice that. So tonight, Artist as Prophet is sort of an experiment in moving, leaning into this, so that we have a more whole approach to our theologizing and our wrestling with what it means to be faithful to the gospel in such a time as this. There are many big questions, right? And so we need our imaginations wakened. I am just really pleased to welcome to you these artists, and we're going to hear from each of them. But Mitali Perkins, she was born in Bangladesh. Close. In India, and she moved to the United States or moved away in age 7, and ended up getting education here, actually right here in the Bay Area, both at Stanford and at Berkeley. And she has done a whole host of things. She's an educator. She has taught all grade levels of school. But what she has been doing most prolifically in recent years is to write young adult and children's literature. And I don't know if you know, but Rickshaw Girl was a book that she wrote, and is actually on Netflix now. And so I really recommend you to see that. So anyway, so without any further ado, I'd like to hand over the mic to... my name is Craig Wong. I'm the Executive Director of New College Berkeley. And thank you for being a part of this next iteration of New College. We get to build on the legacies of David Gill and Susan Phillips, and now we move into the future and really wanting to engage a new, younger generation. We want to be extremely and unapologetically intergenerational in being New College Berkeley. The old need the young need the old. And so I'm really grateful that you all, I hope that you all can continue on this New College journey. So thank you. All right. So Mitali, why don't you take over?
It is so good to see so many of you here. I recognize many of you from days long gone. So it's wonderful to see some of you again that I haven't seen in a long time. We're here tonight to consider this beautiful question of artist as prophet, and you guys are in for a treat. I've just been able to have supper with these 3 wonderful artists, and I got to hear their stories of origin, which was actually really interesting. We talked about how each of them got the vision to become a full-time vocational artist, and they all involved a person. It wasn't a book, it wasn't a movie, it was actually each of them encountering a person, which I found really fascinating. I just wanted to start by asking you, if you see yourself as a visual artist, could you just raise your hand if that's your primary way of creating? Okay, nice. How about like me, you love words, you're like full of words, a word person. Okay, good. And then music, are there people here who offer their creativity through music? Let's see, did I miss anything? Anybody? And all the rest, as they used to say on Gilligan's Island. And all the rest, raise your head, because we're dancing, absolutely. Right. So we're here today as a community of creatives, and we are here to explore this question of especially in the intersection of faith, one of the things I love about New College are all the interesting conversations we have around intersections. And the intersection of art and faith is such a fascinating one, especially for visual artists, because as I said, I'm a word person. And when you think about the artist as prophet, it's easy to think about words, right? But we have 3 visual artists here tonight who are going to share their vision for what that looks like, and especially making the invisible visible, which I love that subtitle. Tonight we're going to hear from Sharon Henthorn-Iwane, who is a word I cannot pronounce. I'm going to try it. iconographer. I can't get that right.
Iconographer.
Oh, okay. Maybe we can all say that together. Can you help us?
Yeah. Iconographer.
Iconographer. Oh, that was helpful to do that together. Yes. Oh, and you'll see their work just beautifully adorning the space. So Sharon is going to share first, and then we'll have Ralph Anderson, who is our photographer in residence, and we have Carol Aust, who is our artist. And so we're going to hear a little bit about their vision. Now, on your seats, you'll notice little squares of paper and a pen. If you have a question at any point in the time we're together, just jot it down for any of them, or all of them. And Craig will be gathering those, and I'll just be looking through them and asking your questions through the evening. So I am just so happy to have you guys here, and I think I'll just hand it over to Sharon to begin.
Am I taking this mic there? Oh. Thank you. Hello. Okay. Oh, that's clever. You can see the slide back there. Okay, next. Oh. Oh, I thought it was clever. Anyway, hi. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I hope you had a great Saturday. You know, when we began our discussions for this event, one of the definitions of prophet that we began working with is someone who speaks God's truth. And then because we're all visual artists, the idea of making the invisible visible. And then questions arose, how do we speak God's truth visually? How does God speak, or how has God spoken through our artwork? These ideas are all part of the foundation of iconography. So almost 30 years ago, I met Charles Rohrbacher, who, unbeknownst to me, would become my iconography teacher. As he showed me his icons and he shared his stories, I felt something stir in me. And then fast forward 10 years later, I reached out to him. And now I've been painting icons for 2 decades. Over the years, I've described those first stirrings as, a coming together of my art background and my vocation in prayer. I also would call it a calling within a calling. But now what I would say I felt at that time, what I recognized was love. God loving me through the icon, and then my response to that love was that I perhaps could be an instrument of God's love in the same way that Charles was, through icons. Next. So at the heart of the practice of iconography is the truth of God's very real presence and his love for you, for me, for the church, and for the world. At the center of that expression of God's love is the mystery and the reality and the truth of the incarnation. John's gospel says that it is out of God's love for us that the Word became flesh and lived among us, and that we've seen his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. And then later in his letter, that we declare to you what was from the beginning, what we have heard, what we have seen with our eyes, and what we have looked at, and what we have touched with our hands concerning the word of life. Next. And so we see icons, and icon literally means image, in many churches. But that was a hard-won existence and part of the growing pains of the early church. This early struggle is partly why iconographers have certain constraints put on them that other artists do not. It was hard-won because in the Old Testament, there is the commandment, you shall not make graven images for yourself. And one side saw icons as making these graven images and therefore breaking one of the 10 commandments. On the other side, they maintained that the graven images were forbidden before Jesus because God had not yet revealed himself bodily. But if God himself chose to become physically human, we can make an image of him. And so the icon controversy officially ended in 843 AD. St. John of Damascus wrote on the divine images, saying, "Since the invisible one became visible by taking on flesh, you can fashion the image of him whom you saw. Since he who has neither body, nor form, nor quantity, nor quality, who goes beyond all grandeur of his nature, he, being of divine nature, took on the condition of a slave and reduced himself to quantity and to quality by clothing himself in human features. Therefore, paint on wood and present for contemplation him who desired to become visible." Next. So the icons of Mary, the mother of Jesus, have a special place in the church for a number of reasons. It points to a special aspect of Jesus' incarnation and the common human experience that we all have of being carried for 9 months and having a human mother. There are 3 aspects that are considered in an icon of Mary. One is the historical aspect of her actually being the mother of Jesus. And the second and third aspect, which is that Mary is symbolic of the reality that we as individuals and collectively as a church or our community are also God bearers to the world. Next. This is a picture of Mary and the Holy Family, and then a picture of her parents. Next, the picture of her parents, Saints Anna and Joachim. You see the bed in the background because she was conceived in the old-fashioned way. It's kind of risque, I know. It's one of my more risque pieces. Okay, next. So how do we make the invisible visible in our culture and context? So as we look at the icons of Christ, we are contemplating the reality, the truth that God loved us so much that he became human and lived among us, that he died and rose again, and he now lives in our own bodies. So we, in our own bodies, can make the invisible visible and speak truth to others in our context and in our culture. As St. Paul said in his letter to the Colossians, God wanted everyone, not just Jews, to know the rich and glorious secret inside and out. That regardless of their background, regardless of their religious standing, the mystery in a nutshell is just this: Christ is in you, the hope of glory. So as iconographers, we paint Christ as the Middle Eastern man that he was. If we want to picture Christ in human form differently, as an African, Asian, Latino, or other man or woman, that we look to the African, Asian, Latino, or wherever else, saints. This is why we have icons of the saints. They have demonstrated by witness of others the presence of Christ within them. So next. And next. Oh, that guy's St. Nicholas. So another way that people talk about prophets or the prophetic are those who or that God or the divine speaks through. So what is God saying to me, to a community, or any church or individual? When embarking on a new icon, whether it's a commission or a personal icon, there are 3 practical parts to the whole process. And one is the initial discernment of what God is saying to the community or person, which icon most embodies it. So there's that discernment process. And there's also prayer and the painting of the icon, where I pray for the person or the community the icon is intended for. I like to share what I believe I've perceived from God in prayer at a later time to them. Then there is the receiving of the icon and the receiving of the truth, the word of love spoken through the icon to that person or that community. All these spaces are where a sacred exchange happens. The process is very loving and personal, and I thoroughly enjoy it. So this is a Tenderness Mother of God icon that I painted for my mother for her 80th birthday. I'm just going to go through some icons that I went through that whole process that I just explained to you. And then I'll go into detail with one at the end. Next. This icon I was commissioned to paint for a woman ending a long tenure with a ministry that served the poor. With this icon of Christ, it's common to have the book of the Gospels open to a verse that is meaningful to that person or community. And it's a very, very popular icon. It's people like it a lot. It's called the Pantocrator icon, which is the Lord of all, the ruler of all. You notice on his halo, on Jesus' halo, it has 3 letters. It's Ohon, which means I am. And then there's always, they talk about an icon that you read. There's always identifiers on the icon of what you're looking at. And so the ICXC, if you can see it with a little squiggle, which means it's a abbreviation, is Jesus Christ in Greek. The next, this is a Baptism of the Lord icon, and it was commissioned to me by a regional, a national ministry, but for their region. And when Craig, who was just speaking, first approached me about being a part of the Artist as Prophet event, and he brought up the idea of the visual arts being prophetic by proclaiming God's word. I initially thought of how my teacher had talked about icons as being scripture in line and color. And that icons of biblical scenes are very common in churches and that you've seen, and that's and some of the reason is that the Bibles weren't as readily available, as you know, until relatively recently, and that the icons were what the laity had to read. Next. This last one. For this icon of Saints Perpetua and Felicity, 2 North African martyrs, I was approached by a pastor who wanted to give a gift to a volunteer who had contributed so much to their Lenten season. Our discernment process began with his identification as an Afro-Colombian and his work in an organization that advocated for women of color. So neither of us knew that Perpetua and Felicity held a special place in this volunteer's heart. And here is his reflection. The icon of Perpetua and Felicity is a beautiful reminder of the strength, beauty, and resilience of Christian saints of color. I first met Perpetua and Felicity, or Felicitas, as I refer to her, when studying the history of the church in Bible Institute and later seminary. Their story of martyrdom was inspirational to me as a young Christian, and then in seminary, when their race and ethnicity was revealed in more detail to me, I became even more enamored with their story. In the icon, Perpetua and Felicity look so serene and peaceful, but also strong and resilient. It is a beautiful reminder of the beauty and strength of Blackness, especially since they were people of African descent. However, this icon is more than just a beautiful work of art. It is a reminder of the strength and courage of these two women who were willing to die for their faith. It is also a reminder of the power of God's love, which can overcome even the greatest challenges. But for me, this icon is also a reminder of the power of friendship. Perpetua and Felicity were friends who supported each other through imprisonment and martyrdom. They were willing to die for each other, and their friendship is an inspiration to me. James Baldwin says in Nothing Personal, "The sea rises, the light falls, lovers cling to each other. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and light goes out." Perpetua and Felicity are drawn literally holding each other, not allowing that light to go out, but embracing one another in their highest and their lowest. They, for me, are a representation of what Baldwin says earlier in Nothing Personal, that a human being could only be saved by another human being. They are the representation of the incarnate's salvific work for us all. If only we could learn this lesson, that they are showing the way that when we embrace each other, we embrace the possibility of love, faith, salvation, and peace. Amen.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. We'll now, are you ready? I'd like to introduce Ralph Anderson, who's a different kind of image maker than we just heard. So let's hear from Ralph.
Wow.
You wanted to hear about it, huh?
And now I know. Wow. I am not going to go down that road like that. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that way. What I will say is that I capture images. And images have been captured for years and years and years and years. So I'm doing nothing new. But I think that what separates, or what is the difference for me, is that I didn't start off in this space. I didn't start off as a photographer, not desiring to take any images or capture any images. I want to say I started off as an artist. But I would say that I started off way before that too. And all I was a person. All I was a creation. All I was a deposit into this space that we call Earth. That's all I was. And I was brought up in this faith space that caused me to believe certain things strongly, like the creation. And God was the best and the first art critic. He said it was good. And that stuff stuck with me. That was the foundation of the faith space first. And then the art was laid on top of it. The desire to be an echo of who God is. And just a simple echo. And so it is for you. However you choose for that to be realized, it is simple, just in that space right there, that you were deposited into this space, and then something was laid on top of you. Whatever that mantle is for you to echo in that space what God and who God is. So I don't know what's up there. There's my name. So if we can go to the next slide, I don't know what's okay. So I think also when you see it, when you can look at it, and when you can stare at it and sit with it for a moment, the things that are obstacles for us in this life begin to fall away. You begin to see that even though clothed in a different hue, that I'm exactly like you. And you begin to see my shoulders, my collarbone, and hopefully the things that are in our way here in this earth begin to fall away. And you get to see me or a person as more than just an object. And that's the beauty in photography, that it separates itself from painting and separates itself from sculpture in that it's the person. And you get to sit with that. And sometimes it's disruptive. Sometimes it's chaotic. When I think about all the images that I came up falling in love with when I was going to the galleries in New York City, and none of them were artists that look like me, but I'm going to say some of their names, like Herb Ritz and Annie Leibovitz and Patrick Demarchelier. And I would go to the galleries and spend so much time in those spaces. But I could live in the art. I could live in the space of what that art presented for me. Sometimes I saw wounded people, and I got a chance to sit with them. Now, I don't know how much you get to sit with wounded people. Well, you're sitting with all of us now. We're all wounded in some way. But when you get to sit with someone in a space that's not you, you get to live and experience life in a different way. And so when you get to sit and look at artwork like that, for me, it changes things for me. Now, I know the story behind this gentleman, which is a different element, a different level for me. But let's go to the next one. I don't always shoot people. Oh, that's terrible. I don't always capture people. I never shoot people. But this was during the pandemic, and I was looking for people, and I couldn't find the people. It was just empty. And how it disrupted me. I needed the people. I want the people. And some photographers like to shoot landscapes, and that's beautiful because we need to see that too. But I needed to see the people. I wanted to see what they were doing, where they were, what the condition they were in, and I wanted to meet with them because I talk all the time. I hope there's a timer. So let's go to the next one. When you can sit with someone and they show up and give themselves to this space. I mostly work with consent. I want to work with consent. Street photographers don't work with consent for the most part, but for me, as a portrait photographer, I want to sit in a space and talk with you first. I want to see what's going on. Where are you? I want to see how we can bring out exactly how you want to be captured. And I want to capture that. And how I do that is I let the light shine on you. And I move you in and out of the light. I don't move my light stays the same. And then I move you in and out of the light, just kind of like life. Sometimes you're in the light and sometimes you're in the darkness. And so with my photography, I try to duplicate that. I want to move it around so in the picture, in the frame, that light is the same as the light there, but it shows differently. It's the same light though. It's one light, and that's all I want to work with. Now, you can let that play around in your faith space, what that means for you. But for me, I know what it means for me. There's one light source, and I want to move in and out of his space. Next one, please. Again, same light, and I just move the person around in the light and out of the light in a certain way. I might put something around you like that, like that. But for that dancer is tethered to the work and tethered to her call. So we found out a way to do that. We found out a way to showcase exactly what she wanted to communicate. And that's what I want to do. I want to be the conduit that allows you to show up the way you're supposed to show up in this life space. Let's go to the next. So for me, this is very personal. This gentleman was so amazing. I got a chance to sit with him. He's a vegan. I ain't never seen a vegan's body look like that before in my life. When I think of a vegan, I think of, well, not me, but probably the opposite. But this gentleman was very passionate about it, And he told a story all in his tattoos. It says vegan on his body. It's not like gang or any other kind of more personal markings I might have. This person has vegan. This is someone sold out to this effort, and I wanted to capture it. On top of that, I said to him, how does it feel to be you in today's world? And I handed him the flag, and that's the picture you see there. And I said, do whatever you want to it. And he just dropped it to the floor, and he put his hands on his head. That's all I needed to spend. That's all I needed for that day. That was a wrap. Let's just go home. So, if there's anything prophetic about the work that I do, and I'm certain that someone would say different, I would say that is that I am simply the echo of what God is trying to do in this earth space. I don't know if I received any images or anything like that to be able to tell the story. I don't know. I'm not trying to overthink it. I'm just trying to move through this life like everyone else. This is my medium. This is my tool, my paintbrush to connect person to person to person. Because here's what's the truth. You don't have your own earth. God in all of his greatness, the creator in all his greatness, put us all in the same space to be able to connect with each other. And therefore, my job is to echo that he needs to be connected to you. And tonight he is.
Thank you so much. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Ralph, for that. I'm hearing what you have in common is this beautiful listening that you do, this quiet before you start to create. And I'm wondering if that's something that you also experience, Carol. Maybe we'll hear some of that. But let's hear now from Carol about her work as artist, as prophet.
Cool. Hi. Let's do the first image. So I'm a painter, and a lot of you know my work, and it feels like a family hug having you here, but I am going to rely on some notes just to stay on track. I feel like there are 3 stages in the creative process for me: conception, gestation, and birth. And for me, it's the conception starts with embracing who I am as a creator, worshiping an artist God, kind of like what you were saying. And I feel that we are God's creations and his artwork, and he continues to work through us. And to get started, we have to really buck our society. In our world, we're told that we're consumers, and we're told that life doesn't matter, or that, you live, you die, and, that's it. And I feel like we have to even pick up that brush, we have to believe that life does have meaning, and it does have purpose, and it has a narrative. And that that God calls us to do the impossible as artists, to make something out of nothing, to face that white canvas, and to remember the glory and the tragedy of our lives. The gestation period is the creative part. And for me, that's a very prayerful space, because it's rooting me in reality. And I get kind of intimidated when I paint, and I have to tell myself, this painting no one is going to see. This one is going to be just for me. And I can show people other stuff, but this one is just for me. And then when I'm done, it's like, psych, okay, you have to show people. But it starts as a dialogue with God. And as we create, we discover how much mystery is hidden inside. There's death, there's resurrection, there's naming honestly the truth of the human condition, but also proclaiming that life has meaning and purpose. And I just need to get out of the way and let the work take over. And some paintings for me are like Ebenezer's in the Old Testament, like the piles of rocks, and saying, okay, you got to remember this. So this painting here is a new one. I just did this one a couple weeks ago. And we just got hit with a lot of illness and death in our lives these last few months. And I wanted to paint the reality that I'll see these people I love again someday. So for me, I did this painting of us arriving in heaven and being told, being greeted and welcomed and knowing that I'll see those loved ones again. Next image. I don't really know what this one's about. I call it a rush of longing in its wake. And it's, I think, just facing the light. I don't know. If you see something different, let me know. Next one. This is another prayer one for me of just by painting this, I'm trying to remember I can let go. I can let let go of the oars and just rest. So it's kind of embedding myself in truth. Next one. This one gets on to the final stage of the creative process, and that's the birth. And for me, art is like having children that the kids aren't complete until they leave home. And paintings for me aren't complete until they leave home. And so this one has kind of a bittersweet story in that I got a call from a woman in North Berkeley saying that she wanted to purchase this. And I was like, cool, that's great. And she said, you'll have to bring it to me. I'm in hospice. And so I went to her home, and a friend let me in, and she was sitting on the sofa. She was dying of ocular cancer. And we just sat and looked at it for a while. And she said, oh, I just realized my grandfather died by jumping out a window. He had been in World War I, came back with PTSD. The first day he was put into an institution, he jumped out the window. And I said, I'm really sorry. I can take it away. She said, no. No, I need to keep this because I always thought that when I died, I would be going into darkness. But when I look at this, I think maybe I'll be going into light. And so she had it there by her for the last 3 weeks of her life. And after that, her friend called and said, she passed away. And I said, it's totally okay if you want me to come get the painting. And she said, no. Her husband wants to keep it because it gives him hope. And so there's an example of the mystery or the prophetic voice. I don't know. I don't know how it works. It's a mystery. Next image. So this had a personal story to it and a broader story in that I have a niece who's like a daughter to me, who was a doctor in Denver and had a series of strokes right after her second baby was born, and was plunged into just a crisis mode financial situation. And I was praying for her all the time, and I sent her an image of this just to let her know. I'll do that sometimes. I'll text someone and send them an image and say, I'm praying for you. And she wrote back and she said, when did you make that? And I told her when I painted it, and she said, I was testifying before the state senate about medical insurance for the poor as you were painting that. So, who knows? It's a mystery. Next image. I do a lot of paintings of moms and babies or dads and kids just to remind myself, that I'm held and loved. So trying to embed myself in a deeper truth. Next one. This one was a prayer for someone I love very much who is dealing with a lot of anxiety. And it was a way that I could pray for her and celebrate her moving forward without fear. Next one. This is an old one. I called it No Visible Means of Support. And I had it up at an open studio, and this couple came up to me, and they were kind of holding each other and holding hands, and they said, we love this one. And I said, oh, great. And they said, no, you don't get it. We have to have this because Eric had cancer this last year, and we had no visible means of support. And I didn't know, it was a mystery. Next one. This one I painted just to kind of be sure that God was holding me and my family in crazy times. And I released it to a gallery, and the director took it to a woman who owns a corporation that we all know, we all enjoy. And she was unloading it in the women's driveway, and the woman came out and burst into tears. And she said, my husband died suddenly, and I was left managing this corporation with my children. And that was the number of children she had. And she said, I have to have this over my bed in my bedroom. So, next one. Open hands. It's kind of like the other one with the dropped oars. Just remembering to let go, reminding myself. Next painting. This one was actually the image was used on a cover of a book, bringing reconciliation between the Aboriginal people and the white Christians in Australia. And I didn't know that when I painted it. So, next image. I call this one Tell Me All About It. This stuff happens all the time. A woman came, sat down with me, was looking at this little painting, and she was like, I love this painting. It reminds me so much of how my mother would listen to me. And then she stopped and she gasped and she said, my mother died on this day so many years ago. It's like, I don't know. It's a mystery. But something's happening, Next one. I call this one Whistle. And I can be a pretty anxious person. And this is where I want to be. I want to just be riding on God's back, and he's whistling and he's confident, or she's whistling and she's confident, and it's going to be okay. Next one. Is that the final image? Yeah. Okay, good. I wasn't sure. So, I love the story of the Magnificat and how God sent an angel to talk to Mary and said, guess what? You're going to give birth to the Messiah. And she was like obedient. And she said, my soul magnifies the Lord. And I think that's my prayer for all of us, that our art would magnify, would make God bigger in our broken world.
Thank you, Carol. That's so beautiful. I love that idea of leaving room for the mystery, for the receiver of the art. I think all of you spoke a little bit about that art isn't just belonging to the person who created it, but also to the person who receives it, right? And so I have a few questions for each of you, or just one question for each of you. And while I'm asking my questions, maybe you have something that you want to ask that you can jot down. Let's just start with Sharon. I was reading about your work, and in fact, all three of them have websites, and you can find out more about their work online. But one of the things that was so interesting to me was the importance of perspective in an icon. And you talk a little bit about the difference between an Eastern viewpoint and a Western viewpoint. And I wondered if you could share a little bit more about that.
Sure. So one of the things that about icons is that draws you in. I mean, there's a part when you, and I have some examples of my work there. If you stand before it, there's just a different perspective and energy that you have. And so with iconography, with icons, they're painted with what's called inverse perspective. So in Western art, that's what we're most used to, or in Western art is what's kind of called a perspective of a vanishing point. Have people heard of that, a vanishing point? Yeah. And so it was kind of like in the science, as people started to understand how vision worked, that they thought, well, we can make things more objectively. We can paint things that look more realistic, therefore more accurate, And so, they would have a vanishing point. They figure out how vision worked, and so as you look at something, there's a point that you're drawn to, and you see things from that perspective. And of course they were saying it was more objective, but actually it's more subjective, because they can determine what the focus is for the viewer, right? And inverse perspective, if you look, and sometimes people say, why do icons look so strange? It's because the image is flattened out and curved toward you. So if you can imagine, any icon I painted of any of you would not look like you totally. So, it's flattened down, it's curved toward you, and so the vanishing point is out here. It's where you are. And so you're included in the scene. And so even if you remember that picture of Saints Perpetua and Felicity, they have an embrace, and yet you somehow feel included. You're not excluded. You're not watching, but you're included. When you look at, that's a different icon of the baptism than the slide, but as you stand before it, you notice that the water, goes out to you, and that you have this sense of being in the water with Jesus. And that's all brought by the perspective. That's the difference between, and a lot of Eastern art is like that, if it's kind of flat, and it's really kind of showing things as you see it, as you engage with it, versus what, we're telling you to engage with. What we telling you is important.
A little less controlled by the creator of the artist, a little more invitational for the receiver of the artist in that dynamic. Oh, I love that. That's really interesting.
And I think it also reflects the truth that God, even though we might feel drawn to art or we might feel drawn to something, that God is the one who's really initiating. That He's going toward us. He's not asking us to come to Him. He's coming to us. And I think that the icon reflects that truth. That we don't have to go there. He comes to us. He includes us.
Oh gosh, I love that so much, and that's really, take your time to go over there and really enjoy the beauty of it, seeing it in, the three-dimensional beauty of what she's brought for us to enjoy. Okay, so for Ralph, you talk about light. You talk about light so beautifully, and thanks for sharing those images. There was just dramatic as you were talking about moving them in and out of the one light. Why do you think lighting plays such an important role in the storytelling aspect of a photograph?
Because my pictures are horrible without the light. No. No. I think that, so wherever the light is, it shows up differently on the subject. And subject now tells a story differently. So I think Rembrandt was really good at having a light in a certain, or duplicating a light on faces in a certain way that it would show dimension and depth. But also light shows your wrinkles. If I can get real specific about it, it'll show the wrinkles. It'll tell the story of age. It'll tell the story of youth. It'll tell the story of, it'll lie to you. It might lie to you. It might show up where it shows you not in the best way, unflattering. It's all the light. So if that person wants to tell the story of the end of life, they might want to show up a certain way. If someone, a child, so you don't retouch any children photos, but the light is everything. So the light plays the most. There's no photography without light. There's us sitting in a room talking about what I was trying to show you, but the light was off. And then a misuse of light, in my opinion. A misuse of light does not show the subject well enough.
Yeah, have you ever can you tell us an example of a time when somebody that you have photographed, the subject of your photography, has been surprised by what they see when your use of light?
Yeah, that gentleman right there, he said, so I'm going to expose myself completely, said the photographer. That room that I shot that in was not dark. And the room that I shot that in had office lights. Fluorescent. Right. So what I did was, photographer speak, I stopped all the way down so you couldn't see the image, so you couldn't see anyone in the room. So when I shot it, you couldn't see what was going on. Then I added the light in the right spot where I wanted it to be, and it only showed up and only showed him in that space. It didn't show anything else. There was a wall, and there was a projector screen behind it, and it was office fluorescent, horrible lighting, in my opinion, for this work. And when he saw it, he said, "That's exactly how I felt." And I put on music that was conducive to him getting to that space, but he wanted to tell a story, and I just needed to write it. I needed to tell the story through what I had available, but he was telling the story, and all I needed to do was use what I had and what I knew, and so I shut out the world. I took all the stuff away. Then I added the light, the right light that needed to tell the story. And when he saw it, he's like, "That's it. That's how I feel."
So he saw the authenticity of the moment that he was in. Yeah, that's a wonderful example. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And so my question for Carol is, you've talked about putting your subjects in precarious positions, and we saw a few examples of that. So I just wondered, why is this important to you, that precarious position of the subject, like out of balance or in the air? Why is that so vital for you?
I kind of feel that's reality, that we are in a precarious situation and that we are in need of God. So just trying to paint the truth.
Yeah, I think the one that didn't have that was that woman standing in the light with her feet firmly planted. She didn't feel precarious to me. She felt very planted.
Yeah.
But
and sometimes that happens, like with the mother holding the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a sense of solidity, but there's sometimes where they're just floating.
Yeah. It's and they're just emotional landscapes. Tolstoy said that I think I've got it here. Art is a human activity consisting in this, that one consciously, by means of external symbols, conveys feelings so that other people are so infected by those feelings that they also experience them. So I think I'm trying to magnify with the landscape the feeling that the characters in the paintings are feeling.
Well, I've definitely succeeded that. Each one just hits you, and not here, but also here, which is such a gift to us. If you have a question, do you have some questions? Just hold up your piece of paper and we'll. Oh, good. Gathering. Okay. As we're I've been thinking a little bit about Micah. What's the reference? Micah 6:8. Yeah, I should know that. doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with your God. And so I know for myself, judging by the number of times I Google myself, that the problem of hubris is quite evident in this field of artistry. It's something that I think we all grapple with, the idea of pride. And the last in that verse is walking humbly with your God. So I think I just wanted to ask you, how do you grapple with the pride of creativity, the desire to be excellent and competent and do something beautiful, to succeed, to stand out, to reach an audience, and that idea of walking humbly in your vocation? Can you just maybe talk a little bit about that balance between success and excellence and humility as believers or followers of Jesus?
Say again.
Did you not get? Okay, do you want me to say it again? I can say it again.
Yes.
All right, so to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. That's a unique call to us as followers of God. How does that apply in your art, that idea of walking humbly with God in the creation of your art and the sharing of your art?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes. Thank you. Sorry. You probably said exactly this
No,
first
I
word.
didn't.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
So I am human. I'm flesh. I am broken. I recognize that. I know that. So the moment I step into a space where ego, edging God out, is in the place, then I feel it because I start looking at it like they're my babies, and I go, oh, did I wrap my baby in the right clothes? Did I represent what I believe in my work? Have I been true? Have I been authentic? And I'm never satisfied with the answer that I have. So there's no way for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but there's a sea of photographers that do, the people that I look up to, the people that are my peers, the work that has gone before me. It's all spoken to me to get me to this place. How dare I be arrogant in this space? I'm just a speck, but a wonderful speck depositing what the echo is of my Creator. So no, I think that's an arm wrestle that I'm gonna lose. Being haughty in my work. Oh no! It's a deposit into. It's like my children. I participated in having them here, but they get to show up the way that they're supposed to show up. My job is just to water the seed.
Yes, thank you. Do you guys want to add anything, or are you? All right. Well, thank you so much for that beautiful image of being a beloved speck. I like that a lot. So we have some questions from you guys, and one of them is actually I'll start with this one. I think this is directed to you, Sharon. The idea of incorporating into icons parts from different faith traditions that aren't Christian. So somebody wanted to know, I think, about the third eye, or does that ring a bell with you? Yeah, incorporating different faith traditions into icons.
Right. So I sort of alluded to the fact that there are certain constraints that iconographers have. Some of it is from the history. And part of that is that iconography is the only official art of the church, only one that the church has come out and said, this is an official art. Like, if this was, as you know, like 850 AD, and we were still one church. There was no great schism yet. There was no Reformation. So we're all one church. And when the fall of iconoclasm happened, this was the one official art of the church. Now, iconography does not have, what is it called? Well, anyway, it's not like the only spiritual art form, right? So my teacher said some of the most spiritual art he experiences is Mark Rothko. who was a non-practicing Jew. And just the color, just sit there and just have these spiritual experiences. So it's not like we don't have the corner on the market. That's it. Corner on the market on spirituality and spiritual experience. So, but what the church, what iconography does is it reflects what the church believes. It reflects truth. Not my opinion, not what my opinion is about what is true at the moment. Because, as human beings, it's very fleeting. Like, it's the flavor of the day sometimes, what we believe. And but then again, there's no icon police running around arresting us. So there's actually the model I used for Saints Perpetua and Felicity was by a very accomplished iconographer named Robert Lentz. Have any of you heard of him? He's a wonderful artist, and he painted in the tradition for a very long time, and then he started to just, put his opinions in it. Like he'd have Christ, and there's Chernobyl in the back. I mean, there's all these things, and it was not wrong. It just wasn't it wasn't a canonical icon. It was so. You can do, and then I actually was part of an iconography community in the city, and there was, I would take pictures for my teacher, because if there was an iconography police, he would be on it. So anyway, I would show him, and there's a Lady Godiva with a halo. There's a dancing, well, actually the dancing bear, I guess, was part of a real actual icon. And there's all these, people that are not even Christians that had halos, and that's fine. It's fine to do that, because everyone has their opinion, and some people, again, are met in very deep ways. So it's just as an iconographer that once we decide to depart from the canon, that is not, officially an icon, but, like, again, who's, arrest me, sort of like that, but, so, if that makes sense.
It does, and it raises that interesting question about the art versus the artist. Like is there 5 theological things that an artist has to believe in order for it to communicate, to make the invisible visible? Mm-hmm. Or can a Lady Godiva on a horse communicate something about, so it brings up that interesting tension about the art and the artist, and how, because none of us, as you said, have a corner on the perfect theology, so all of our art is going to have some room for mystery, right? So I appreciate that a lot. So another question, and maybe this is good for you, Carol, because somebody wanted to know, in what ways do you think art can speak not only to individuals, but to communities as a whole? And I love this question for you, because I've seen your art on display at First Pres Berkeley before I even met you. And it really feels like sort of the voice of that building is a lot of your artwork. So can you just talk a little bit about art being received by a community as opposed to an individual? That's a hard one, but...
Well, there are times when I've done paintings for worship spaces. So the chapel at Oakland City Church has a large painting. A church in Boulder has a large painting in their sanctuary, and and there's also the Sojourner community in San Francisco has one, and it's been fun to work with them. I'll always say, okay, what's the ethnic and age breakdown of your congregation? And they'll say, oh, well, we're pretty white, but we want to change that, or something like that. And so creating a painting of a dinner party of their church as what they would hope to be, inclusive, people coming in, people flying out from the dinner, people of all colors and ages and stuff. So that's been really fun.
I've seen that painting at Boulder First Pres.
Have you?
Yeah, my brother-in-law's a pastor there, and I've always sat in that worship space and thought exactly that, like it's a vision of what the church could be. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, and then do you have any more questions back there, Craig? Do you have any more questions from the audience? Because I have one more, and I hope I get to read this right. And we'll send this one to Ralph. This is a good one for you, actually. It's perfect. how do you get to tell your story when you create the image with specific people? So your story versus their story.
It's a great question. I think that my story is a part of their story for the most part, not removing myself from the human condition. So when that gentleman said that, I felt that too. I'm working on a work now. It's called Demigod, Demigoddess, I See You. And it's a look. I'm going to go deep into people of color and the spaces that they exist, who they serve, and why they keep going when everything says stop. So I'm going to spend some time with them because that's my story. That's the question I'm asking myself in the moment of every day when I look in the mirror or when I come to work or I'm in traffic or I'm considering the next artwork or the next art piece or reaching out to someone, or when I go to talk to someone in the street and I'm taking their picture and they rebuke me. I'm connected to you, and yet you don't want the connection. So I don't think I'm removed from any one of your stories, which is the beauty of the greater art that is life. So when you see any work of mine, it's because there's a little piece of me in there. Annie Leibovitz said that, no, sorry, I'm sorry. That was, I think, Patrick Demarchelier. He said, I shoot the people that I've fallen in love with. And I've fallen in love with all of you. So when I tell your story, I'm telling my own story.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Are there, Craig, do you have some other questions that you want to hand me, or do other people have Yeah, go ahead. Sure. So your question is, do you experience this powerful presence, frightening presence with you? So like a supernatural experience as you're creating. Okay. Got it. Yeah, yeah. So the fear of the creator co-creating with you and showing up in the moment of creation in a visceral way. Yeah. Have any of you experienced that sort of mystery of really feeling God in the space with you as you are creating, and that led you to this awe or even fear? Yeah. Have you experienced that? I mean, you don't want to share. You don't want to share personally, but is that something that you all resonate with?
Yeah.
Especially during the pandemic. In the pandemic, when I was out shooting street photography, or empty street photography,
Right.
the absence of people was deafening. It was unbelievably surreal. And then I would find someone walking through with their Starbucks cup.
Yeah.
Just the normalcy of life. And I was like, there they are. But absolutely, I think that happens a lot. And it's, I'm looking for that, actually. I once if it happens once, you want it again and again and again and again and again. And it doesn't always happen that way, but when it does, I'm looking for that. I want that. I don't want to be in the studio just.
Right.
I want to connect.
To have that numinous moment, yeah.
I'm not sure if this is exactly addressing what you're saying, but one of the things about iconography, especially when you're painting something for a person or to be used in their own devotion or community in their worship. It's you can be kind of want everything to be perfect. You want everything to, mean something. You can't control that, of course, right? And in fact, in the Orthodox faith, an icon becomes an icon when that becomes a part of a worship moment, whether that's a private or a public one. But so sometimes I get overwhelmed with this sort of feeling of like, oh, this isn't going the way I want to go, or it is going the way I want to go, and Charles, my teacher, says it's never going to be perfect. It's not about perfection. You have to ask yourself, do you believe? And it's those moments when I'm in that process, and I realize I'm starting to believe, and that can be overwhelming. And that's usually when I know it's going right. So, but that also answers sort of the humbling question, which is, about faith.
I love that question about asking yourself in the process of making, do you believe? I really like that as practice. Thank you for sharing that. Did you want to say something?
There are so many good photographers, so many excellent photographers. And just to take a point that when you're shooting landscapes, for me, like I could have an empty sky and a certain amount of clouds roll in, and I go, so it was different before, now it's totally different. And like, how did that happen? And why did that show up that way? And I'm going to capture that, and that's just for me. And that was just for me in the moment. So there are many, many moments like that. Now in the studio, it's a little different, but when I'm out and about, when it's just me being pressed against uncomfortable spaces, stuff like that happens all the time.
Love that. God showing up for you. Yeah. You have that?
I think it's if this is real, if this is real, if there is a God who is communicating with us and wants to create through us, we can't waste a minute. And all the stuff that the screen time and the distractions, and it's like there's no space for that. It's kind of a terrifying thing, spoken by a very anxious person, but it's like I can't waste a minute.
So it's almost a call, like a Macedonian call, like the urgency of God saying, create with me, make this with me. You have a sense of that urgency in that moment.
My work started. I told you the story before of the concert, but actually my work started in the therapy context. And I did 2 paintings a week to show a therapist on watercolor paper. And after a couple of years, I had all these paintings piled up. And they were really dark paintings of like blood on walls and, people screaming and children on fire and all the whole gamut. And then I put them out at an open studio for $75 a piece. And people were fighting over them, trying to get these paintings, taking them out. And it was this hush awe of, holy cow, this is a calling. God, my life will never be the same again, that there's a purpose.
Yeah, thanks for taking us into that moment when your art was first seen and first received and you saw the power of it. That's a really beautiful moment of calling, yeah. Does anyone else have a question? Yeah, go ahead, Sam. So it's a missional question. The idea that this generation is open to beauty as a doorway into the house of faith, and so how can we? I guess that question would be for the younger generation. Have you seen a response to your art in that way, and like a drawing people into that space of awe, where they would be open to something other than just what they see and feel? Like, is that something that is? Am I asking that correctly, Sam? That idea of it being a missional for the next generation. Okay, so let's rephrase that. I like that. So, how can the church value art and give it that beautiful place, that high place, so that it can be used as a gateway? Like, do you have any words for the church in terms of valuing and showcasing art?
Do it. No, making space for that is incredible and really important. So I met Carol Aust before I came to First Pres. I was at a cafe in Oakland, and her work was on the wall, and I was like, that is amazing. And then when I got to First Pres, I had an interview at First. I work at First Pres, so I had an interview at First Presbyterian Church of Berkeley, and I walked up the stairs and I saw a similar work, and I was like, "Oh, it's the same person." So I wanted to say that because I want to say that the work is so. In this case, Carol's work was somewhere else. That seed was planted in me before I got to First Pres. And when it got to First Pres, it tethered me to some truth in First Pres that I couldn't see before I got there, and I couldn't see when I got there because I was focused on the interview. So I just wanted to say that the work is out there. The work that you created based on the calling, that's not you chasing, that is chasing you. Because it's chasing us. If you talk about these artists as prophet, there's a call that's chasing us. She can't not do that. She has to do it. You have to do it. It's in you. It's chasing you. It keeps you awake. It haunts you. And I tell my daughter all the time, go after what's haunting you. So, not all of the Gen Zs. So, I just want to let you know, there's a violinist that I know that's a Gen Z that is beyond ridiculous. There's a cellist that I know that's a Gen Z that's beyond ridiculous. My children in my home inspire me so much that in their conversations, they're inspiring me to do more of what I am called to do. So if the church could do anything, it would listen to the Gen Zs. That was a mic drop, sorry.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I like the fact that Carol's art was both in the church and outside the church. And so therefore it drew, it reiterated that it was valuable, beautiful art in both the spaces. I have my friend Chad Summers here who sings opera, and he's of that generation. I don't know if there's other people here, but I don't know. Think about how you would answer that since you're in your 30s, early 30s. Think about that, and we'll let Carol talk, and then maybe we'll have you answer that.
I think I actually have a low view of the permanence of art. I think most of the paintings that I create will not be around in 70 years. Most art is destroyed. It ends up in landfill. My paintings have been found at Urban Ore and Goodwill, whatever.
That's one way to humility.
Yeah, that's one way of humility. I think what is more lasting is that it helps me to connect deeply with people. So if I have, so for like 5 years, a young adult painted in my basement next to me. There's her own space, but I was like coming alongside of her and other young adults, just encouraging them, and also having a vocation that gives me time to do other like tutoring Yemeni refugees and things like that, so that I can connect with people that way. So maybe not through the art per se, but having the space and time to reach out to them.
And through the relationships of mentoring. That's another way to reach that generation. Yeah, that's wonderful. Did you want to give it? Sorry, I put him on the spot, but I told him I might.
Hello, I am Chad, and Mitali's my good friend, and I'm not on this panel. But I think one thing that a common thread that I've heard as artists is we are not in control. We are not. We cannot disobey the call to create art, and ultimately that makes us conduits through which God, the Creator, can create. When it comes to different generations receiving that, when it comes to different communities receiving that, I'm also not in control of that. And I don't think any of us are. And yet, God is creating those people to receive it as well. So I'm not sure if it's my responsibility to tell people that they should or should not receive what I'm doing, or what we should or should not be doing. But I think it's the faithfulness of the artist to create. It's the faithfulness of the artist to respond to the call to be a conduit. And it's the faithful trust in God that it will find a community and its intended reception where the Father intends it to be received.
Are there other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Chad.
Based on your talking through, Ralph and I had a conversation about this art years ago, and he referred to you.
Here, I'll hand you the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ralph and I had a conversation years ago talking about your art, particularly, but he also mentioned you and your role as a mentor, and he referred to you as an art whisperer. And since my daughter has been a recipient of your love, really, in that regard, I just want to acknowledge that. I think it's a great term, very poetic.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I love what you said about having a big picture of God in that, just being faithful to create and having God bring the response. I really like that. Any other questions that we might ask our panel?
Well, I know that Carol, she's a friend of mine, and she also...
You need the mic?
I thought I was loud. I'm so famous for being loud. Okay. I know that Carol also, besides doing art, she also encourages people to do art. And when you were saying about how can we use art to bring in people to faith, I think doing art is something that's powerful for people. It really opens them up to their creativity, which is opening up to God. And so doing art, and I was I did a lot of art with kids because I was a teacher. And just this comment that I loved so much doing art with kids that each of them would take the materials and express themselves. It's such a great way to have people express themselves, and in expressing yourself, that's when your power and your faith can come in. You have to express. You have to be.
Yeah, thank you. I like that a lot. You know, each of us has a unique voice print and fingerprint, and so maybe the church creating space for that expression, a venue to create, a communal allows each person to express their unique God-given identity. Yeah. Any other questions you have for the panel? Yeah, go ahead.
Just one, just going back to the kind of younger generation question. It seems like all of you are very much in tune to the other artists that are out there and that you are, inspired by that. What are you seeing coming from younger Christian artists, and what's your reflection of them?
I think a lot of the young people out there, they really want to be authentic. And so they're trying to be authentic, and yet they're also trying to understand themselves still. So, and they really love to come alongside older people and and so, I am also a spiritual director, so I actually through New College for the last 3 years have been leading a spiritual direction group of students, undergraduates, and they some of I think everyone will agree, like visual arts or art is just one expression of our individuality, our authentic faith, our authentic selves, and our response to the world. And some of what the young people are looking for is sort of that authentic path for themselves, to be encouraged, to be walked and mentored in. And it's a little different. Growing up in the church now is a little different than when we grew up or when I grew up. And it's, but being a spiritual director to young people and allowing the freedom and not try, I learned too about authentically walking out into the unknown and into uncertainty. And I just think that young people, they're so open about that, about they don't know where they're going. Even if they know where they're going, they don't know where they're going. And that sort of desire just to be okay with that. And I think that as older people in the church is to not kind of, have so many, and I think art helps, I think, in that way. So many, you're talking to an iconographer, so many defined lines for them to walk. And if they go this way, it's like, oh, watch out. And there's so much fear, right? Oh, go that way, watch out. But to trust that God is guiding them, God cares about them and their walk of faith so much more than we do. And I don't know, I think that kind of faith in them and in their path, God's path and relationship with them just goes a long way. And I think that will stimulate and support creativity and more of the arts and more expressions artistically as well as in so many other ways.
Yeah, that idea. Yeah, I think that's right. That idea that generation is more open to mystery and less rigidity, which is very fertile for art, right? That the idea of co-creating with God in this mysterious way we've been talking about. So we can expect, I think, beautiful art to come from this generation. And our job, as you said, is just to have a big picture of God, to care for them. I'm going to have to, one last word from Mr. Ralph, and then you can do the mic drop, and then we have to there's snacks out there, there's art to consume and enjoy, and artists to ask questions of, and we'll just let Ralph have the last word here.
I would just say, you or we are the doors. We're the gatekeepers. We say yes, and we give permission. Get out of the way. Let this generation create. Water them. So if you put a seed in the ground, right? Do you go down under the ground to see how the roots are going? Do you go and move the dirt around to make sure that it's okay? You let that seed be the seed in the space that it was designed to be a seed in until it becomes more than a seed. That's all. Just get out of the way. Get out of the way in a way that supports, that doesn't leave them alone. Get out of the way that allows them to show up, not that you would abandon them. Get out of the way in a way that you become less of an obstacle and more of a support.
Yeah, that's good. That's lovely.
They're looking to show up. They're knocking at the door. Why is the door not opening? So just open the door.
Yeah, I love that.
And like Carol's paintings, keep an open hand.
Yes, that is beautiful. Did you want to say something? All right. Well, thank you all so very much for coming. I'm going to hand the mic to Craig, and we just really appreciate you being here. It's so encouraging, I think, for us as creatives to see that you are with us, right, and that you stand with us. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Mitali, for leading our conversation. Great job. I also want to thank Pastor Hudson. This is our City Center Church, and Savannah back there, who has been so helpful. So thank you. This has been a great venue. Before we get to the food, and I really do want to encourage you to mingle with the artist and to spend some time eating and enjoying one another. I just want to share a couple things. One is that one very important announcement. is that about a month from now, the weekend of August 18th, if any of you are interested in actually trying iconography yourself, there you go. So that's going to be right here in Berkeley. It's going to be at St. Mary Magdalene Church, Catholic Church in North Berkeley. It's going to be a whole weekend thing, so Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I really want to just... Yes. Yeah, Sharon's going to teach it. Yeah, no experience necessary. There is a fee, all right, but it's well worth it. But I want you to consider that very seriously. The other thing I want to just say is that New College, we are rebuilding. And I want to thank all of you who contributed for tonight's event, which helps to really pay for making this event possible. We're rebuilding a New College as a whole, and right now we're in the middle of a very focused summer fundraising campaign. And so if you can just grab one of these brochures, if they're in the back, you can't miss it, right back there through those doors. Grab it and read it, pray about it, and if the Lord would lead you to give again to New College so that we can keep building and continue to have events like this. I was so grateful that we ended on the note of encouraging and cultivating and nurturing the next generation, because I think it's like the most important thing we need to be doing. And just want you to know that New College is we are dedicated. You'll see there's a lot of young people on the front of this, and so we have begun to really move into connecting with and finding places of encouragement and nurturing of the next generation, of the Gen Zers and millennials. And so anyway, that's the adventure ahead, and I really want to just invite you to be a part of that, and also by providing financially for us. So let's see, those are the two things. I think that's really mainly it. So thank you so much for coming, and again, we got tons of food out there, so please stick around and enjoy the food, enjoy each other, and thank you very much.